Hey, I'm Carson James. We're going to do a little chat about Spurs, and looks like the kitty's going to be joining us on the chat for this video. So, a lot of you guys are probably thinking, and you're right thinking this, you've probably all heard the saying or the terminology where it depends on how you use it. And yes, that is true. Any piece of riding equipment could be the greatest thing in the world, or it could be the worst thing in the world, and it's totally dependent on who's behind the wheel, right? But we're going to dive in a little bit deeper than that, because that's kind of like the story that everybody's heard. So I wanted to talk a little bit about different spurs and why you may or may not want to use them. So just jumping right in, when you look at a spur, you look at the different rowels, and there's several different ones here. Now, people would generally think that between, let's just say, between these two right here, people would generally look at those and they would think that this one is the one that would have more influence over the horse because it's bigger, so it looks like it would have more. But when you think about it from the angle of pressure distribution, you realize that it's not always necessarily what you would think. So you notice, I think this is like a 30-point rowel. You see how many points this thing has? It might as well just be a disc. Whereas this one, it's got some stuff hung up in it. Whereas this one, it's fewer rowels and they're spaced further apart. Now, take that thought as I pile all my spurs in my lap here. Keep that thought. And then take your hand and put it palm up. And then push down on the center of your palm with one finger. With, I don't know, some amount of pressure. Now, with that same amount of pressure, take all four fingers, make sure they're kind of the same length, and then push down. What you'll find is even using the same amount of pressure to push down on your hand, because that same amount of pressure is distributed over a larger area, it's not as concentrated. So it's the same amount spread more evenly. The same way that a good saddle tree is meant to distribute the rider's body weight evenly over the horse's back. Same kind of deal. So when you're ever talking spurs or looking at spurs or thinking about riding in spurs, remember that the size of the rowel has a lot more to do with the influence that it would have over your horse. So out of every spur here, if somebody said, yeah, I want to try spurs to, try a new way of communicating with my horse, but I'm not really good at them and I don't want to do too much, this is actually the one that I would recommend. This is one of the most modest, gentlest spurs. I mean, there's very, very little there. Now, this one here, it is a large rowel, so it's got, a pretty wide pressure distribution, but you notice there's fewer points. So yes, it's more mild because it's a little bigger, but it's a little less mild because it's fewer points. Imagine if there were 2 more points in between each one of these points. Well, now you're having something that looks more like this. And if you were sitting here right now and held your hand out, I could do kind of this deal on that hand, on your hand, have you take note of it, and then I could do this, and you would say, oh wow, yeah, this rowel is actually much less distracting, or however you want to call it. This one does not grab as much of your attention as this one does. So it's actually the size and the amount of points that a rowel has that makes it more or less influential on your horse. So that's kind of the basics of spurs. Here's some here. These are just some old antique bookend kind of thing that I got at a yard sale a long time ago. But they're these would probably be a little bit more influential than these ones here. It's about the same amount of points, but this is smaller. So we're talking about going from, 3 fingers to maybe 1 finger pushing in. So out of all the rows you've seen so far, these would be the most severe. Now, with all of that being said, a lot of people don't really have good feelings when it comes to Spurs. And that's, that could very well be a good thing. Because just like a riding crop or a O-ring snaffle bit, or even riding your horse around in a halter, any form of riding equipment can be unfair and become pretty mean to a horse. For example, if you take not even a rope halter, a nylon webbed halter, and you put it kind of low on his face where it's low on his nose, and then if you take the lead rope and you jerk it pretty hard, you could very well either break off the end of his nasal bone that comes to a fine point right here, to where now you've basically got a bone spur floating around in your horse's nose, or you could also really pinch the skin on their muzzle into that sharp bone that comes to a point, and it's not quite halfway up their face, basically about a hand's width above the top of their nostril is kind of where that bone comes to that small point. Same thing with a riding crop. The idea with a riding crop is to reinforce when the super light leg aid did not work, or it can also be used to kind of show the horse, hey, when you feel this, I want you to move your hip over to the left, because you can reach all the way back to their hip with a crop, where a leg, you can't actually reach all the way back to their hip. So you can be, as far as teaching, you can be more direct. So just keep in mind, no matter what it is you're riding in or not riding in, the approach that you take and the way you think, and having patience with your horse, working at the level your horse is at, that is all way, 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 way more important than should I use spurs or not. A lot of times people will go to a spur because the horse gets heavy, but here's kind of the catch-22. If you were able to get a horse dull and heavy to a calf muscle or a leg aid or a heel, well then, yeah, you will temporarily probably feel him be a little more responsive if you add a spur. But if he got heavy to your leg, your timing is off, so he's going to, at some point, start getting heavy to the spur. People do the same thing with bits. Well, I've made him heavy in this bit, so I'll go to a bigger one. And then they dole him out in that one, and they go to a bigger one. So, once again, it has way more to do with us, say 95% us, our hands, our timing, our communication, 5% the equipment you use. So, keep that in mind when you ride, and it'll cause you to be a better, more in-tuned rider, and you will have much, much better results just thinking that way. So kind of the same as spurs, except for people struggle a lot more with this one, is what kind of headgear to use on your horse. Whether the horse is heavy, lazy, if he's anxious or wanting to bolt or buddy sour. So there's a lot of confusion out there about how to match up the right type of headgear for your particular horse. So we have also done an entire video, and it's all about headgear and how to properly use it and how to properly select it and how to make sure that whatever type of headgear you end up riding in, that you're going to have good results and it's going to work well with your particular horse. So to watch the video all about headgear, just go right here.
Okay.
No, I'm just kidding. To watch the headgear video, just go right here. And we will see you next time.